They called her the Voodoo Queen of San Francisco, a procuress who dealt in secrets and flesh, a back-alley abortionist, a murderer who walked away clean. The newspapers, hungry for a villain, painted her in the darkest shades of sin, christening her with a name meant to mock and diminish, Mammy Pleasant. But the powerful men whose fortunes she built, whose children she mentored, and whose ruinous secrets she kept locked behind a knowing smile. They simply called her Mrs. Pleasant, and they said it with a shiver of respect and a heavy dose of fear. Good evening. In the heart of every city, there are ghosts. Not of the spectral kind, but of lives so immense, so defiant, they were deliberately erased, paved over by the comfortable lies we call history. Tonight, we pry up the cobblestones. We descend into the fog-choked memory of old San Francisco to find a woman born between worlds, a woman who became a legend by mastering the art of being seen as whatever she needed to be. Her story is not a comforting one. It is a masterclass in vengeance, justice, and the brutal acquisition of power. She was born a slave, they say, and died a millionaire. Or was she born free, and died in poverty, a pariah in the city she helped build? With Mary Ellen Pleasant, the truth is always a negotiation. The battlefield of whispers. Her beginnings are a battlefield of whispers. The official record, the one she sanctioned late in life, chisels her birth into a gravestone. August 19, 1817. But other accounts claim 1814. She said she was born free in Philadelphia, the daughter of a full-blooded black woman from Louisiana and a native Hawaiian merchant. A story as exotic and untraceable as she was. Others swear she was born into bondage on a Georgia plantation, that her first lullabies were the clang of shackles and the weeping of mothers sold south. What does it matter? In a nation that decided your soul's worth by the shade of your skin, a past was not something you had, it was something you constructed. A weapon, a shield. Her first act of power was to seize control of her own narrative, to muddy the waters so completely that no one could ever truly claim to know where she came from. The only thing certain is that she was a survivor from her first breath. The education of invisibility. We find her first, a small girl of perhaps 10 or 11, stepping off a coastal vessel into the biting salt wind of Nantucket, Massachusetts, around the year 1827. She had been sent away, sold, or perhaps spirited to safety. The details, as always, are lost to the fog. Nantucket, an island of paradoxes, a hub for the brutal whaling trade that lit the world's lamps with rendered flesh, and a sanctuary for Quaker abolitionists, who risked everything for the cause of human freedom. She was placed in the home of a Quaker family, the Husseys, as an indentured servant. They were kind, in their way. They taught her to read the Bible, to write her name, to keep accounts for their shop. But kindness has its limits. She was their servant, their charity case. She was not their daughter, and so, in the quiet spaces of their respectable home, her true education began. She later told a biographer, "I have let books alone and studied men and women a good deal." The Hussey's home and shop were her laboratory. She served tea at abolitionist meetings, her face a polite, empty mask, while her mind dissected every word, every gesture. She learned that the men who spoke most loudly of righteousness were often the ones with the most to hide. She saw how money moved, how debts were incurred, how a whispered rumor at the right time could ruin a man's reputation or make another's fortune. She learned that to the powerful, a servant is invisible, and in that invisibility, she found her first and greatest weapon. They spoke freely in front of her, of financial troubles, of secret sympathies, of illicit affairs. They forgot she was there. They forgot she could think, that she could remember. She filed it all away, every scrap of information, storing it in the vault of her mind. This was a currency more valuable than gold. The secrets of powerful white men. The abolitionist operative, While the Hussey family taught her piety, she taught herself commerce. She was sharp, quick with figures, and soon she was practically running their shop. She understood supply and demand, the art of the deal, the subtle dance of negotiation. But Nantucket was too small a stage. The world was cracking open. Gold had been discovered in California, a land of mythic opportunity on the other side of the continent, and the nation was a powder keg, ready to explode over the question of slavery. Mary Ellen Pleasant felt the tremors. She knew her destiny was not to be a quiet shop girl on a windswept island. Sometime in the 1840s, she married. His name was James Smith, a wealthy merchant and a fervent abolitionist who passed as white. Together, they were not just husband and wife. They were operatives. Their business was a front. Their true work was in the shadows, as conductors on the Underground Railroad. This was not the genteel abolitionism of Quaker meeting houses. This was espionage. It was moving human cargo under the cover of night, using coded messages, secret compartments, and a network of trusted souls. Mary Ellen was a natural. She had the cool head, the actor's ability to wear any mask, and the quiet authority that made people trust her with their lives. She learned how to be a wealthy lady's maid, a cook, a deferential servant, whatever the role required to move people from bondage to freedom. When James Smith died, he left her a fortune and inheritance of somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000, an astronomical sum for anyone, let alone a black woman in the 1840s. His final instruction was clear: use it for the cause. She did, but she knew that funding escapes one by one was not enough. To fight a system, you needed to attack its foundations. You needed to sow chaos. Her eyes turned to a man who spoke her language of righteous fury, a fiery abolitionist named John Brown. She met him in Canada, a gaunt, wild-eyed prophet of liberation. He dreamed of a slave rebellion, an army of the freed that would march through the South and shatter the institution of slavery with force. He had the vision. She had the money. She gave him $30,000 of her inheritance to fund his planned raid on the federal armory at Harpers Ferry. A receipt was later found in Brown's abandoned papers after the raid failed. A note that read, "The axe is laid at the root of the tree." It was signed with the initials MEP, but by the time they found it, Mary Ellen Pleasant was long gone. She had vanished. The empire of secrets. She re-emerged in 1852, in a place that was itself a grand reinvention, San Francisco. It was a city born of gold dust and desperation, a chaotic landscape of mud-slicked streets, ramshackle saloons, and half-built mansions, a place where fortunes were made and lost in a day, where a person's past was their own business. For a woman like Mary Ellen, a master of disguise and reinvention, it was the perfect territory. She arrived with a new husband, John James Pleasant, and a plan. She listed herself in the city directory as a cook, the most invisible of professions. It was the key that unlocked the city's most private doors. She worked in the homes of the new elite, the bankers, the politicians, the railroad barons. And just as in Nantucket, she listened. While she cooked their meals, she heard their drunken boasts of market manipulations. While she cleaned their rooms, she found discarded stock certificates and business letters. They saw a servant. She saw an opportunity. With the information she gathered, she began to invest. She bought shares in mining companies, laundries, and city waterworks. She loaned money at exorbitant interest rates, always securing the loan with property or a juicy piece of blackmail. She opened a series of lavish boarding houses, which were far more than just places to sleep. They were her intelligence hubs. Here, the city's most powerful men came to dine, to gamble, to conduct their illicit affairs. And Mary Ellen, the gracious, smiling hostess, saw and heard everything. Her boarding houses were palaces of discretion. But her price for that discretion was information. She knew who was cheating on his wife, which judge could be bribed, which politician was secretly bankrupt. She built an empire of secrets, a web of influence that reached into every corner of the city. The mother of civil rights, she used her growing fortune not for personal luxury, but for power and for her people. She became known as the mother of civil rights in California. When new arrivals from the South, both enslaved and free, came to San Francisco, they were told to go to the unassuming house of the black cook, Mary Ellen Pleasant. She gave them shelter, found them jobs, paid their legal fees, and hunted down their family members who had been sold away. She was a one-woman social service agency, a protector, and a fierce advocate. In 1866, long before Rosa Parks, Mary Ellen Pleasant sued a San Francisco streetcar company for refusing to let her and another black woman ride. The case, Pleasant v. North Beach and Mission Railroad Company, went all the way to the California Supreme Court, which ruled in her favor, effectively desegregating the city's public transit. She won, but the victory came at a cost. She was no longer invisible. She had shown her power. And the city's white establishment began to take notice. And they did not like what they saw. The Bell Mansion and the fall. Her greatest and most destructive partnership was with a white Scottish banker named Thomas Bell. He was a clerk at the Bank of California when she met him. A man with ambition but no capital. She saw his potential. They became partners. A secret alliance that would make them both astonishingly wealthy. She provided the insider information and the initial capital. He provided the white face needed to move in San Francisco's racist financial world. Together, they amassed a fortune of some $30 million, the equivalent of nearly $1 billion today. They lived together, along with Bell's wife, Teresa, and their children, in a 30-room Gothic mansion on Octavia Street. It was a bizarre, tense arrangement that fueled endless, sordid speculation. Was she Bell's mistress? Was she blackmailing him? Or was he simply the public face of her financial genius? The truth was likely more complex. She was his mentor, his business partner, and the true master of the house. She managed his investments, controlled his finances, and raised his children. But as the years went on, the relationship soured. Bell grew resentful of her control. Teresa, the wife, was trapped in the middle, a pawn in their titanic battle of wills. The press began its assault. They couldn't attack her for being a brilliant capitalist. So they attacked her for her race and her gender. They twisted her power into something sinister. Her boarding houses were brothels. Her knowledge of herbal remedies was voodoo. Her work helping young women was procurement for wealthy men. The legend of the evil Mammy Pleasant was born. A racist caricature designed to strip her of her dignity and her power. The end came in 1892. One night, Thomas Bell was found dead at the bottom of a staircase in their mansion. The official ruling was an accidental fall, but no one believed it. The city exploded with accusations. Had she pushed him? Had she poisoned him? The whispers she had so expertly used against others were now turned on her with venomous force. Teresa Bell, likely coached by opportunistic lawyers, turned on her benefactor, suing Mary Ellen for control of the entire $30 million fortune. The court cases that followed were a public crucifixion. Mary Ellen's entire life was dragged through the mud. She was portrayed as a conniving, demonic schemer who had enslaved the Bells through blackmail and black magic. The city she had helped build, the people she had fought for, watched as she was systematically destroyed. She fought back with everything she had. She took the stand and told her life story, a defiant, rambling, and often contradictory narrative that only fueled the public's suspicion. In the end, she lost. The court sided with Teresa Bell. Mary Ellen Pleasant, the woman who had once controlled millions, was left with nothing but a small monthly stipend. She was evicted from the mansion she had designed and built. She spent her final years in poverty, living in a small apartment, a ghost haunting the edges of her former empire. When she died in she was a notorious figure. Her triumphs buried under a mountain of slander. Her friends, a small, loyal group who knew the truth, honored her last wish. They had her buried in the Tuloke Cemetery in Napa, and on her tombstone, they engraved the words she wrote herself. She was a friend of John Brown. It was her final act of defiance. A reminder of who she truly was, not a monster, but a revolutionary. The life of Mary Ellen Pleasant is a labyrinth with no clear exit. Was she a saint or a sinner? A selfless freedom fighter or a ruthless opportunist? The answer is that she was whatever she had to be to survive and to win in a world designed for her to lose. She understood that for a black woman in 19th century America, respectability was a cage, and power was the only real freedom. She used the master's tools, capitalism, secrecy, and blackmail to dismantle the master's house from the inside. They tried to erase her, to reduce her legacy to a racist caricature, but they failed. Her story, once you find it, is a testament to the enduring power of a single, indomitable will against an empire of prejudice. If you believe stories like Mary Ellen Pleasant's deserve to be dragged from the shadows and into the light, then help us continue this work. Hit that like button, subscribe for more forgotten lives and dark histories, and leave us a comment below. In a world of impossible choices, was Mary Ellen Pleasant a hero, a villain, or something far more complex and necessary? We'll be waiting for your verdict. In the dark,